A quick note, what you are about to watch, it's a deep dive video remix about the life of Screamin Jay Hawkins. To see where this material is sourced from, please look at the watermarks in the video as well as the credits at the end.
Now, one of the prime movers of rock and roll is Screamin Jay Hawkins. You rock and rollers from the 50s will remember him bringing a coffin from the grave to the stage. Well, he's certainly one of the forerunners of wild antics on the stage when rock was in its heyday. Tonight, he's our in-studio guest with Marion.
In the early 1970s, Alice Cooper shocked the world with his wild stage shows, combining hard-hitting rock and roll with a grand guignol aesthetic. Unseen outside of horror movies, Cooper's concerts featured snakes, dancing skeletons, and the nightly execution of the singer by guillotine. Although kids loved it, parents saw Cooper as evidence of a downfall of Western civilization. A few years later, Kiss would take up Cooper's mantle with their live spectacles of blood and fire. Naturally, the older generation was again outraged. As the 70s ended, horror imagery and theatricality infiltrated the already controversial punk scene when the Misfits adopted a combination of monster movie camp and violence as a musical and stylistic ethos. By the 1990s, the term shock rock had become a catch-all label for bands and musicians who incorporated dark imagery and themes in their music and concerts. From the hot rods and monsters groove of White Zombie to the depressive grind and apocalyptic overtones of Marilyn Manson, the impact of music blended with horror-infused theatricality was undeniable. The success of bands such as Slipknot and Ghost are testaments to shock rock's continued viability, just as the continuing popularity of stalwarts such as Gwar and the aforementioned Alice Cooper prove its longevity. However, long before Alice Cooper, another performer rose from his coffin to put a spell on music fans with a macabre stage show that thrilled audiences of the 1950s. This is the true story of Screamin Jay Hawkins, shock rock pioneer.
The young man I was talking about has a great...
Jalacy? I know I'm reading that name wrong in the voiceover. I'm really sorry about that.
Man. Oh, my sister, she's a cruel woman. I said, what are you talking about? Well, you don't know there's more than 18 of us. What are you talking about? I said, hey, it's possible. Every man she was with, she had it made until she met your daddy. I saw your daddy only once. He was tall, mean, ugly, and black. And from what I understand, he came from some place like in Saudi Arabia. He wasn't even American. And he was a dog. And when she was in the hospital, and you know what? She was messing around with Aunt so-and-so's husband, and so they took bricks and stones and they beat your mother while she was carrying you. Other than that, you would have been born in Washington, D.C. And they took her to the bus station, run her out of Washington, D.C. She's on the bus with you, and by the time the bus is passed in Cleveland, Ohio, she's having these, what do you call them, pains?
Labor pains.
Yeah, pains. And she had to get off the bus, and there you were born in the hospital, and she kept on going. Oh. Then she come back a week later, or 2 weeks or something, I don't have the timing right on that. But she knew this Indian people, Blackfoot Indians. So she made a deal with them. They'd take you out to orphanage where you were put into and raise you. She would contribute money to this. And the orphanage itself would give her money for taking you. And they would give you clothes. You would have anything you want. But you were not to know anything about your father. That was her promise. If you do that, we'll never mention his father. So I grew up not knowing nothing about my father, which I still think is wrong.
I don't know what Jay's hangups were with his family, but whatever happened to him growing up clearly had a profound impact on how he would carry himself throughout his life, especially perhaps in regards to his children.
And there's no love in this family. When the Blackfoot Indian died, her name was Edith Randolph. When that woman dropped dead. I was 6 months getting back into Cleveland to just pay my respects to the burial site where she was. And her daughter, her name is Cecilia Belcher, she says, Jay, just before we leave, do me a favor. Turn around and walk across that road.
The campaign to win Okinawa, vital as a base within fighter range of Japan, soon develops into a desperate and prolonged struggle.
As revealed in I Put a Spell on You, Hawkins' military record is festooned with half-truths and outright falsehoods. One oft-repeated tale is that the singer dropped out of school at 14 and falsified his birth certificate to enlist in the Army during World War II. The story is true that Hawkins did lie about his age to enlist. He was, however, 16, not 14. In the 2001 documentary Screamin Jay Hawkins, I Put a Spell on Me, Hawkins told the filmmaker of his experiences in the Pacific Theater.
How many people did you kill?
In the Second World War, my outfit got ran over by a battalion of Japanese. And I was isolated for 8 months in one of the Japanese intern camps. And I was a sergeant. And I was a young dude, but I did a lot of killing. I enjoyed it. I didn't have no danger. I figured if they're going to kill me, I'm dead in, so I kill as many as I can. And it was beautiful to me to be able to take a life knowing I don't have to go to jail. But he's the enemy. If I don't kill him, he'll kill me. So when they caught me, they caught us, and they overran our camp. We were asleep. And the guy says, well, he's a sergeant. I saw his stripes. So he says, okay, we want to know the strength, how many people, where your mechanized stuff is, how many shots. I said, let me tell you something. You can ask me. Listen, I was raised in America. I went to Yale and all. I said, you know, asking me questions, you get no answers. Because I am black in America, and they don't even tell me what time the chickens wake up.
Hawkins then regaled the filmmaker with a harrowing tale of 8 months he spent in a Japanese prison camp, climaxing with the singer taking bloody revenge on his captors.
They put me over here and told me to fight or I would die or they'd kill me. Now that's it. So you got me. Do what you want. You want to torture me? Kill me, because I don't know nothing. All I'm going to do is scream you to death. I'm going to make enough noise to drive you crazy. But you might as well kill me. I'm over here killing you, so kill me. You got me. So they turned around and they beat me for about 3 months. Every morning they stuck knives in my butt, in my thighs. I got knives marked here, under there. I got them. And the doctor's saying, damn, you got more scars on you than a crossword puzzle. I said, I'm alive. That's all that's important. So anyhow, then I became a joke. And they said, well, don't bother him, you know, he don't know nothing. So when they caught the American white boys, they got mad because I wasn't tortured. I said, I was tortured before you got here. But I don't expect you to believe it. Yeah, but why don't they ask you questions? I said, they asked me everything.
Screamin Jay Hawkins definitely comes from the oral tradition of storytelling. He took his life and he made it larger than what it was.
And they found out nothing. Well, we don't know nothing. I said, well, you're white. You got to be right. I'm black, so I got to get back. And they didn't like it. They didn't like it. They didn't like making jokes, man. But it's the only way to laugh when you're facing death. You got to find something to live and be happy about, or you're dead anyhow. And then when they did save us, the guys came in, the paratroopers got 82nd Airborne came through there, and they liberated us from that camp. So I told the dude, I said, give me your gun and give me one hand grenade and leave me alone for about 1 hour. He said, what are you going to do? I said, I want the commandant. And I busted in, I shot 3 of his guards before I got to him. And then I tied him up and put him in a chair. And he says, what's your problem? We stopped bugging you. I said, for what you done to me, I got to get even. And I forced the hand grenade in his mouth and taped it around his head. And then I looked at the door and yanked the pin and ran and leaped out the door and laid on the ground and watched his whole head disappear. And then I was satisfied. I get a guy back his gun. I says, okay, we can go and get on the LSD now.
Let me tell you something. If I had the kind of power in Hollywood that, say, someone like Steven Spielberg commands, and if someone from a studio was just like, hey, you can do a biopic about anybody you want, the #1 choice would be Screamin Jay Hawkins.
However, as detailed by biographer Steve Bergsman, official records show that Hawkins enlisted in December 1945, 3 months after the war's end. Hawkins used his gifts as a musician as a member of the Army Air Force's Special Services Division. Hawkins often repeated these stories to band members and friends. It didn't make any difference how close you were to Jay, Berkman writes. You got the same bullshit as everyone else. Although Hawkins never saw combat in either World War II or Korea, he nonetheless served with honor and was discharged in 1952.
Oh, shape nothing, man. They're afraid. Hell, they know everybody in the world's gonna see this fight, and none of them got a prayer whipping me. So they're making excuses so they don't have to be the chump to get whipped in front of the whole civilized world.
Aside from music, Jalacy Hawkins' great passion was boxing. Powerfully built and long-limbed, Hawkins was no doubt a formidable opponent in the ring. According to Case Western Reserve University's Encyclopedia of Cleveland History, Hawkins got his start in the sport while in the military as part of the Army's boxing circuit. However, like many aspects of Hawkins' life before fame, his boxing career suffers from an immense lack of verifiable facts. Ultimately, Hawkins' participation in the sport, like his military record, was subject to the singer's love of a good yarn. In the 1984 book, Nowhere to Run, The Story of Soul Music, author Jerry Hershey, perhaps caught in Hawkins' storytelling spell, claims that the performer was the Golden Gloves middleweight champ of 1947.
When Screamin Jay Hawkins talks about his life, I don't think he comes from a place of deceit. I think he comes from a genuine desire to want to entertain people. It comes from a desire to want to create this larger-than-life mythology because it's far more interesting than what he thought his real life was.
However, the Golden Gloves middleweight title went to Chicago's Nick Rearney that year. As detailed in I Put a Spell on You, The Bizarre Life of Screamin Jay Hawkins, there are no records of any fighter named Jalacy J. Hawkins winning a Golden Gloves championship in 1947. Hawkins claimed that he defeated Bill McCann to win the Alaskan middleweight title in 1947 is also dubious at best. McCann, a welterweight, retired from boxing in 1944.
He was a character that you would never forget and a friend that you would love to have because he wasn't a liar. He wasn't a liar. He's like my kids. They don't lie. They tell you just what's going on. Bam! Just lay it out there. And that's the way he was. I hope you like me for that lie I just told for you.
After the war, the young people, they didn't want to have the old language that their parents had used. They were looking for something new, something a little more direct, because the war got rid of a load of our social and moral barriers, you know. So they wanted a language that was more to do with that. And I think Bo Diddley and Screamin Jay came in there, you know.
You know, you were there, you were one of the persons that started rock and roll, so you were working with the blues, rhythm and blues part of the music world first, and then you got on the other part, on the rock and roll.
Well, I didn't want to get on the rock and roll.
During the 1950s, racial segregation was prominent in the U.S. It wasn't uncommon for restaurants to refuse service to African Americans or for there to be select seating on buses for black people.
The earliest memory I have is our parents and friends and neighbors teaching us about what we should do and what we shouldn't do. We had to make sure that we behaved in certain ways, and there was a different world, black and white world. If we walked down the sidewalk and a white man was coming toward us, we had to look down upon the ground. And if a white woman walked down our same sidewalk, we would have to walk out in the streets. Couldn't walk down the same sidewalk. We couldn't ride in the front of the buses. We couldn't use certain facilities, restrooms, and different things around town. If we wanted to go and buy a pair of shoes or clothing, they could only hold the shoe up. We couldn't try them on. We couldn't try on a cap.
The same segregation could be found in music. Big band orchestras led by white performers were marketed to a white audience, whereas rhythm and blues records were marketed to a black audience.
And if you had white musicians in the band behind you, they had a curtain. Wow. They put you in front of the curtain and they didn't show the band.
Oh yeah, and if you make a hell about it, then the Ku Klux Klan come in and they kill you.
Is that right?
I'm telling you the honest to God truth. I was there, I seen it. This is not something somebody told me or I read. I went through it.
I mean, imagine you living in a society somewhere where blacks and white cannot even talk to each other, cannot work together.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about the early 50s when you were on the straight R&B shows. Now, those shows played to all black audiences? I'm talking about down south.
If down south, no. Down south, you played to pure white audiences.
audience.
These so-called race records by artists like Chuck Berry and Fats Domino found an unlikely audience in the white teenagers of the time. The music began to break down racial barriers as fans both black and white would attend the same concert venues and listen to the same radio stations.
And when I went to New York, I went to these shows by myself, and it was about, I would guess, half and half black and white, or maybe 60% black and 40% white. And we were all just kids. There wasn't one altercation. And you're talking about kids pushing other kids out of the way, and there wasn't one fight. And there wasn't one thing about, black name calling or white name calling. It was just kids.
The police didn't want black kids and white kids dancing together. Before rock and roll, they fight. They were cutting and shooting one another. Rock and roll, they started dancing. It changed everything. Not only in America, all over the world.
I had a cop smack me in the back of my head as hard as he could with a billy club, because when I got off the bus in Macomb, Georgia, and that's James Brown hometown, I can understand why James Brown's so crazy.
White artists like Buddy Holly were playing traditionally black venues and vice versa. The sound of rock and roll can be seen as the mixing of two cultures. The black rhythm and blues meets the white country and western. The record labels and radio stations saw dollar signs, and to cater to this new mixed audience, they started promoting both white and black artists. Rock and roll swept across the nation, and many claim it helped usher in the civil rights movement.
Based on accounts from Hawkins' daughter, Sookie, as related to biographer Steve Bergsman, the Majestic's bar, known in the 1950s as the Rose Room Cocktail Lounge, was especially important to Hawkins' formative years. Located in a predominantly black area referred to as Cleveland's Harlem, the lounge attracted both African Americans and a young white audience.
I was trying to decide what I wanted to do. I spent 1 year with Tiny Grimes before I left him.
In 1952, Hawkins landed a steady gig as a piano player and vocalist in famed jazz guitarist Teeny Grimes' band, the Rockin' Highlanders.
He gave me my first professional job in show business. I was fresh out of the Air Force.
Yeah.
And Tiny Grimes hired me for $30 a week to be his chauffeur, his bodyguard, his dog walker, his saxophone player, his piano player, his blues singer. He even wanted me to carry some of his drugs. I mean, the man was weird, and he drank Italian Swiss colony muscatel wine in Southern Comfort, lit up a stick of marijuana, stopped at the red light, hit the brakes, and then turned around and talked to you while the car is drifting out into the intersection. That's when I quit him.
Now a full-time touring musician, Hawkins often took his wife Anna Mae and daughter Sookie on the road with him. But as his career with the band progressed, he spent more and more time away from his family, and his life as a professional musician took a toll on his marriage. In live performances, Hawkins drove audiences wild with his rowdy approach to blues and jazz.
You know, I said this before, and I'll say it now. You really have a fantastic voice, basso profundo, you know.
And what's interesting is that when he's doing his vocal thing, 1 second he's doing this deep baritone operatic thing, and then the next minute he just twists it slightly, and all of a sudden he's shrieking.
At a gig in West Virginia, an especially enthusiastic fan shouted, "Scream, baby, scream." From that night forward, Jalacy Hawkins would be known as Screamin Jay Hawkins.
I don't think I'm a Frank Sinatra. I don't think I'll ever be a Tom Jones.
In interviews, Jay is very self-deprecating about his musicality, but the reality is his voice. He's not just a vocalist; he is a singer.
But I've never found a man. My mother always told me I had a big mouth that would get me in trouble. I found out that it can make me a living. This is why I scream. This is why I hollow. This is why I do all the weird.
It's a shame that he didn't get more vocal training. I feel like he just didn't always know how to utilize his voice in a more traditional way that might have given him more mainstream adoration.
While with Grimes, Hawkins recorded the plaintive blues tune, "Why Did You Waste My Time?", which showcased his powerful baritone voice. The song paved the way for Hawkins' solo career.
One of your old mentors was playing down about 2 months ago down at the Press Club. That's Tiny Grimes was playing here in town.
I saw the advertisement in the newspaper, and something first said, "Go visit him." And then something else said, "No, you don't like him either." So I didn't go.
After a brief stint with Fats Domino, he signed with Oath Records in 1955. Hawkins' insistence on originality led to conflict. A true original, even before he began incorporating the horror elements that would make him famous into his show, Screamin Jay Hawkins was determined to be his own man. An iconoclast with little regard for trends, Hawkins frequently clashed with producers and other musicians. In 1954, Hawkins joined Fat Domino's band. The pairing proved disastrous. Domino's characteristically laid-back approach just didn't mesh with Hawkins' big, bold, bluesy shout. Nevertheless, it was Hawkins' sartorial choices that led to his ouster from Domino's band. According to contemporary black biography, the Blueberry Hill singer fired Hawkins after he showed up for a performance in a leopard skin suit.
I spent a year with Fats Domino before Fats Domino would say, "You see this ring? That cost me $36,000. You see those shoes? $2,500. How much your shoes cost, Jay Hawkins?" I says, $2. And then when he told me, he says, "Go in the balcony. There are 5 balconies in the Apollo Theater. Go to the last and tell me how many times my diamond ring sparkles." I said, "You can't count that. Every move you make, it may sparkle 15 or 20 times. Because you trying to make an asshole out of me." He said, "You know, I'll knock the fat black off of you." I was really pissed with him. So I quit. But I learned from these people, man, to them, money and success went to their mind. They didn't know how to treat their fellow man.
Ironically, Domino figured in an early altercation in which Hawkins nearly came to blows with a legendary music producer and record executive. As documented in Nowhere to Run, Hawkins was delivering a typically wild vocal performance during a 1953 Tiny Grimes recording session, when producer Amit Ertegun gently suggested that he tone down a song, a Hawkins composition titled Screaming Blues, down a bit, and sing it more like Fats Domino. "Why don't you get Fats Domino?" Hawkins shouted. A further suggestion to calm down was the last straw. Hawkins bellowed, "Go to hell," at the producer, and by some accounts, the imposing bluesman attempted to punch out the comparatively diminutive producer. Screamin' Blues was never released. Soon after the disastrous recording session, Hawkins exited the Rocking Highlanders.
There's something incredibly punk rock about Screamin Jay Hawkins. He's an outlier.
So I says, "Well, how can you be different and still be right at the same time?" One, I can't sing. Not to my knowledge. 2, I can holler. I can scream. I said, "You want a name?" That's it. Screamin Jay Hawkins. I said, "Now, if you're going to scream, you got to scream on everything. So that means you're never going to be a good singer. You can't sing anyhow. Make noise."
And it seems, in tandem with that self-deprecation he has in interviews, that he almost uses his deep register and his flirtation with opera as a gimmick to cover up the fact that he's not particularly a trained singer, although he could have been. He is truly one of the most unique voices in all of rock and roll.
What they didn't know is my heart has always been opera.
When I hear the voice, I think of a baritone, although some people may say a bass, I don't know, you know. But it's a really rich instrument. And I mean, I hear him singing all sorts of music. I mean, hear him singing as he wanted to do the European arias. You know, there's gospel music is black operatic music. There's European operatic music. There's many different forms of operatic music, if we think about it, coming from great theatrical traditions that were defined to be gestures to the gods or conversations with the gods. These are these kinds of performers.
It was like Jay was trying to approach the opera from this horror voodoo theatricality standpoint in the guise of rock and roll.
So I began to scream. Oh, until you make me cry.
His voice voice is so thick and so deep and so robust that pitch almost isn't a problem. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Okay, we know the record company people are a bunch of goddamn idiots. Okay, we know this. Malakas, they're all idiots. There may be a couple of exceptions somewhere. But what kind of an idiot do you have to be that you can't even hear this voice? That this voice is completely different than any voices around. You know, it's completely different. It's completely gigantic voice, a great instrument. I mean, what's the matter with it? Are they completely deaf? You know, and this makes me think, yeah, they must be. Really?
Why did you create this gimmick? Because you do have a voice.
Well, I created the gimmick because I realized a hit record never lasts too long. And when it dies, if you don't have a hit record with it, and being a black man, we didn't have much help in those days. We were lucky enough to get a record, and maybe the record company would give you a Cadillac, and if you were a little smart and a little cool, they might give you a white lady on the side and a couple of $1,000, and that was the end of it, you know.
Was it called payola then? Those kinds of trimmings?
Definitely. If I blow the lid on them now, they'd have a fit on them. I'd have to put a spell on everybody. But I wanted to stay around, so I come up with this idea of doing something different with Henry here.
Yeah.
I have a hand that crawls, and as Bill mentioned, I get out the coffin.
Make me a favor. Can you say to me, I put a spell on you, like you said it in 1956?
1956.
In 1955, Screamin Jay Hawkins recorded his signature song, I Put a Spell on You.
Why do you say 1956?
It's not 1956.
The original spell came out in 1900. It was recorded in 53 of December.
Oh,
it came out in 54, right after New Year's.
I'm not sure if it's out there, but can you hear the original version of I Put a Spell on You?
Originally conceived and produced as a straightforward blues ballad,
supposedly it was a lot slower, a lot tamer.
This version of Hawkins' dark ode to unrequited love went largely unnoticed.
I think what's really interesting about I Put a Spell on You is that it's a waltz. Bum 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 bum. And I feel like that's not talked about enough.
But when I done it in 54, I said, I put a spell on you.
He goes from lyrics to gobbledygook back to lyrics.
No running around. I can't stand. No putting me down. I put a spell on you.
His second attempt at the song in 1956, however, would make him a star and the song a rock and roll standard. Ever the showman, Hawkins had several versions of the story behind I Put a Spell on You, which varied by audience, but all centered on heartbreak.
So then this girl turned around and she looked at me and she said, I want to know, are you making love to other women when I'm not here? And she only come on the weekend. I said, of course not, you know, they're fans. I'm lying, you know. And she said, Jay, tell me the truth. If you're doing something and I ask you and you tell me now, we'll stay together. If you lie to me, I'm going to leave you.
The original story he told in Nowhere to Run centers on a 1954 performance at Herman's Bar in Atlantic City. After the gig, Hawkins returned home to find his girlfriend had left him.
Her clothes were gone, the pictures was gone, the records was gone.
Distraught, Hawkins let loose a single heart-rendering scream and wrote the song on the spot.
I love you!
I didn't know that much about Screamin Jay then. And 2 weeks later, I'm in the studio doing I Put a Spell on You. And I dedicated it to her.
The second version of I Put a Spell on You came at the urging of Columbia Records executive Arnold Matson, who suggested Hawkins do something different with the song. To that end, he brought in some refreshments for the band. So Matson brought in a case of Italian Swiss Colony Moscato.
Italian-Swiss colony started in 1881.
That's when an Italian-Swiss lad who tended to the vines fell in love with a lass who crushed the grapes to make the wine.
And we got all our hearts spent. We got all blind drunk, Hawkins told the author of Unsung Heroes of Rock and Roll.
You can hear strange, mythical energy on the recording of this track. It's legendary.
Do you know what he was doing? No. No, because you always said that in studio recording spell, he was drunk as a skunk. He didn't know what he was doing. He was in love and said, I want you, you know.
And even though myth or not myth, he wrote that song from a place of heartbreak, I don't think that I Put a Spell on You becomes I Put a Spell on You until he gets blind drunk in the recording studio and makes it about the underlying deep-seated emotions he might have felt at that time.
10 days later, the record came out. I heard all those drunken screams and groans and yells, and I thought, oh my God.
WINS, your contact station. The city is New York, and the beat, you guessed what the beat is. The big beat, the biggest of them all. Rock and roll, the greatest pop musical era of all time.
When pioneering rock and roll DJ Alan Freed played I Put a Spell on You on his radio show, it became an instant underground favorite.
But Alan Freed and I met before the world knew Alan Freed. He was known as Moondog in Cleveland.
You're from Cleveland.
And I'm from Cleveland, and we thought Alan Freed was black.
Yeah.
Entranced by Hawkins' haunting and seemingly diabolical vocal stylings, an audience of mostly white teenagers made the off-kilter love song a hit.
Because he was on a station that played nothing but white music. In those days, it was very prejudiced.
Uh-huh.
So we all got a bunch of people from our street to go down and thank this black man for getting on a white radio station playing black music.
Yeah.
Come to find out, behind that voice was a white man. But he had a lot of black soul, so we thanked him anyhow.
Yeah.
Before the mainstream got a glimpse of Screamin' Jay Hawkins, he had already established a reputation as a dangerous wild man thanks to his hit song.
In general, the structure of I Put a Spell on You leaves a lot of room for improv and all sorts of visual gags that allow Jay to really play into the theatricality that he was so good at.
That was before the coffin days, but what he did was they would announce him, and then the stage would be bare, and across the stage would come these clattering teeth.
Because instrumentally, the band is kind of locked in. They're locked into the waltz. They're just going dun 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 dun, and then Jay can just play. He plays over that. He can, in a way, it's almost like, I know this sounds really crazy, but in a way, it's almost like the song is in complete service to the vocal.
Yeah, and then from out of nowhere, you could see then the curtains would open and it'd be like this guy would have his back to you to go down. I put a spell like that. He just jumped out at you like that. And as a kid, you just jump back.
And just to break up the monotony of the same waltz timing, a saxophone comes out of nowhere to just cut through. Do 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 do. In addition to this notion that he was a magician by way of being a musician, there's almost a vaudevillian quality to what he's doing. I feel like Jay would have been the biggest thing since sliced bread if he had come up in a time before recording. He would have just been on the vaudeville circuit doing that act over and over and over again until he died, which is pretty much what he did as Screamin' Jay Hawkins.
I think maybe he was too real. To a certain degree, he acted out things on stage, but what he acted out on stage was definitely real. It was definitely part of him.
But no matter what Jay says about his stage persona, it still very much is ingrained in his identity. It's who he is.
To get up on that stage and act like a stark raving idiot. It's make-believe, but most people think there really is something wrong with me, and I guess deep down in my heart, John, maybe I am crazy.
It was like Jay took all of the stuff that make magicians exciting and combined it with being a musician. He was a magician. He was a magician. He was a magician musician.
People say I'm crazy. I wear a bone in my nose and I do all kinds of things. So I says, okay, if you got to be different to be successful, thank you, Dr. John.
As detailed in Unsung Heroes of Rock and Roll, critics and moral gatekeepers interpreted I Put a Spell on You as being about everything from cannibalism to rape. Consequently, many radio stations refused to play it.
So I was one of the first targets. They tried to ban my records. My record sold 2 million when it first came out. When they started banning it, it sold 18 million. So I didn't say nothing. You know, I says, okay, stop everything I do. I hope you ban every record I make.
First night I ever saw him, I could see it in his eyes, clearly. You know, the man was, you know, I don't want to say insane, because he wasn't, but definitely possessed.
But there's so much more to Screamin Jay than just his shtick.
I think a lot of the madness that possessed Iggy Pop was originally in Screamin Jay Hawkins as well.
His shtick is just the icing on the already packaged deal. He didn't even need to do that. But that was his gimmick. In the 50s, you needed a gimmick.
Like when these guys hit the stage, they become possessed. Something takes over them and they get lost in the persona.
I would like to say possessed with the spirit of rock and roll, but something beyond that. So definitely possessed with this, definitely possessed with the spirit to go beyond what normal people do.
It's not a character per se, it's a persona, it's an alter ego. It's where the id lives. And when they have thousands of eyeballs on them, all of a sudden they can pull it out and they become a completely different person.
On the strength of Hawkins' cult hit, Alan Freed added the singer to his traveling rock and roll review. Encouraging Hawkins to amp up the horror movie vibe of his performances, Freed suggested that Hawkins rise from a coffin at the beginning of the set.
Alan Freed is the reason I'm in this coffin. He put that coffin into my act, not me. I didn't think up that idea. He said, now I want you to come out that coffin when the curtains open while the lobster-scope is on. And it would look like you're moving 1,000,000 miles an hour. He says, I guarantee you the people would tear the seats out of the floor, which they did do.
You know, it's kind of hard to go on stage behind a man that's got an act that kids want to see again, you know, again and again, you know, with the bones and the flashing stuff that he did on stage and stuff like that. That made it want to be seen again.
All of the theatrics that Jay implemented in his stage act were a way of getting a rise out of the audience without actually touching the audience.
It just blew my fucking mind when this fucking hearse pulled up and this coffin come out. And he jumps out of this coffin with a pocket full of firecrackers. Pow, he throws them down and they blow up, you know. I think that he's one of the most creative guys, because he was a fuck-up like me. You know, we are fuck-ups.
A decade or so later, Iggy Pop is breaking down that barrier between the audience and the performer. Before that, you have Screamin Jay Hawkins hopping out of a coffin, doing all sorts of parlor tricks and magician tricks and gags and goofs.
I thought up Henry. Yeah. I thought up blowing up the place and making fire come from my fingertips and a hand crawling across the stage. I thought up all these weird color clothes and stuff. The ties are colorful. I like ties. The tie matches with the...
What does this one mean?
This means that sooner or later I'm going to put a spell on you. No, it just means that this man, Jay Hawkins, has a lot of fancy taste in color. That's all it means. I like colors. I like brown, black, gold, beige. I like colors. I think colors express your soul.
But Alan Freed is the one that fought up the coffin.
Now, I told him, I said, I won't do it. Black people don't get in that until they're dead. And that way they don't have to worry about getting out. He said, Jay, you guys, I said, forget it. I've done you a lot of favors. I don't owe you nothing. I'll do anything you want, but I won't get in that coffin.
And he made an offer I couldn't refuse.
He followed me all the way up to the dressing room. He says, you will get in the coffin. And he pulled out a big wad of $100 bills. Jay, you got to. You're going to.
He sat in my dressing room and just kept filling $100 bills. And I said, you can't buy me. But I was a liar. And he bought me.
I said, you can't buy me. But he kept on. I kept watching. I didn't want to miss nothing. And I'd never seen $1,000. And when he got to $2,000, I got weak. I said, well, I'll try it once, you know.
And I've been doing it ever since. And it's made it possible for me to work. Here it is, 1988.
He turned the places out. You know, it's kind of hard to go on stage behind a man that's got an act that kids want to see again. You know, again and again. You know, with the bones and the flashing stuff that he did on stage and stuff like that. That made it want to be seen again, you know. And even me, I'd stand and watch.
But if that's the only, if being like this enables me to go to the bank, I'm going to stay this way.
Jay, speaking of things you're in, now the coffin is, this is actually, for some people, coffin isn't a sign of prosperity, but for you it is. I mean, you get a little money, you buy a new coffin. I mean,
Right.
I don't normally do that. Paul doesn't do that. Now,
No, that's usually the last thing you buy.
oh, that's right.
That's not one of the things you buy.
Let me clarify one thing. This is my 18th coffin, if we're going to talk about, because see, I live mostly on the East Coast. Now, I've been living here in LA since 1985. So this is my second coffin here, because I still have one at home. You've seen it. You've been in my pad.
Yes.
There's one leaning against my icebox.
As detailed in Nowhere to Run, Hawkins spent much of the 1960s mired in paranoia and alcohol. Angered by institutionalized racism in the music industry, Hawkins began to believe that there was a conspiracy afoot to keep his music off the airwaves.
I haven't had a hit record since the 1960s. I had a lot of pictures where they put my records in.
While Hawkins struggled to get a foothold on the charts, artists such as Nina Simone and Creedence Clearwater Revival were finding success with covers of Hawkins' hit.
Well, I think they're all crazy. David Bowie did it, The Crazy World of Arthur Brown. Creedence Clearwater did a splendid version. But the one that stands out in my mind more than anybody else was Nina Simone.
All right.
She did an operatic version of Spell, and I couldn't believe it. I listened to it maybe these times, and I said, I can't believe this woman. She's good.
I got fed up. I went to Honolulu for 10 years because I figured the world wasn't ready for me, Hawkins exclaimed.
But you were very happy in Honolulu. You lived in Honolulu.
Oh, Honolulu was the best part, yes. But I had to leave Honolulu. They was telling me then, you're 20 years ahead of your time. People ain't ready for somebody like you.
In the meantime, all these people are recording my goddamn stuff.
A lot of people have covered your song and put a spell on you. What do you think of those covers? Marilyn Manson did it last year in that movie, Lost Highway.
Yeah,
What did you think?
What's that guy's name? Manfred Mann. There was a lot of people that did it, and I've lost track. Them, the Trackers, Who, Animals, Eric Burton, Nick Cave.
I get the impression that everybody's going places with what I was doing 15 goddamn years ago. Everybody but me.
But she made me angry last year because she put out a book called I Put a Spell on You, her autobiography. And she says, I was overwhelmed when I heard Alan Price's version of Spell. And I said, Alan Price? I know Alan Price did a cover. But when she first did it on her album and says, I Put a Spell on, she says, when I saw Screamin Jay Hawkins do it, I fell in love with it. Now on her autobiography, she gives Alan Price credit. That turned me against Nina Simone.
There was money being generated by I Put a Spell on You, but Jay wasn't getting any of it.
Even the New York Yankees use I Put a Spell on You to frighten the opposing team. It's on Simon and Simon. And I know I just got a couple of royalty checks 2 weeks ago, and it tells me where my money comes from.
There was money being produced
money being generated by I Put a Spell on You. But Jay wasn't getting any of it.
That goes back to dollar bills. You understand? And see, and I have to say it this way. I hate to do it this way, but they would pay my white brothers, but they wouldn't pay me.
Bo Diddley was the first to say, you know, there's a white guy out there watching everybody dance. And he's stealing all our acts. So I'm saying, what's the problem? Some dude out there by the name of Elvis Presley. I said, oh yeah, I think I run into this man.
Record producer Mylon Melvin explains. Jay told me that when he asked for his own royalty money, he was told that black people don't get any royalty money. They just take what's given to them without asking. Convinced that the record industry was controlled by the mob, Hawkins says he was told to disappear or be killed.
And when Jay insisted and tried to use a little muscle, Jay told me that's when he discovered that the record industry at that time was controlled by the mob. And Jay was told in no uncertain terms that if he didn't disappear, the only thing he was going to get was a pair of cement shoes in a nice quiet resting place at the bottom of a river somewhere.
The old record company game, which has gone on since recording was invented, is the artist comes up with the ideas, the artist delivers the message, it goes onto wax or magnetic tape or digital masters, which are kept by the company, owned by the company, leased by the company, or bought in perpetuity and beyond into death, beyond death, they own your music. And the very nature of the rock and roll music game is that the artist has to go out and promote the music. So therefore, you immediately separate the artist from his income, which has to go into some bank or some accountancy somewhere. And then you have a thing called creative accountancy, which means you don't get what you're supposed to, somebody else does.
I said to him, you know, I have a band, I'm on a record label, it's a small label, I told him it's nothing big, it's nothing that's gonna make you very much money. And the very first thing he said to me is, I don't like white people. And I said, well, Jay, I don't like any people. And I don't know, that just seemed to break the ice.
You became very rich after that.
Well, I don't know about rich. I just know that I'm satisfied, I'm happy.
Hawkins' disgust with racism nearly drove him out of music and would be instrumental in his decision to leave the United States late in life.
I prefer France to America.
Yes?
I don't like America, so I stay in France.
Was America maybe a country without pity, and that's why you're living in France now?
It's a country without pity if you're Noir. I have to say that, because that's black. So there's a lot of problems, even to this day, in that country I was born in. If you ask me why am I in France, that's one reason, yes.
And there are a lot of racial diehard dudes still living today. And I think that was one of the reasons why Screamin decided to leave America, is because he couldn't take it no more.
He was always more appreciated in Europe. Even before I made Stranger Than Paradise, I was in a band for a while, and this one guy, and Philippe Van Hagen was a bass player in our band. He was French, and he knew everything by Screamin Jay.
Because the French people love you more than the American people?
Well, let me put it to you. If the French people like you, you know it. If they don't like you, you know it also.
But other friends of mine in like punk scene in New York were not that familiar with Jay, so I think he was always more appreciated there. But that's true of most, like, sort of, I guess, like non-mainstream culture in America, or the real shit is more appreciated elsewhere.
In America, they don't care what you do or who you are, so long as you got money. Money talks. In France, the individual, the person talks. That's important.
America wants to be able to control her blacks, Hawkins said.
I'm not ashamed to admit it.
That's one good reason. There's a lot of good black artists in France today because of the problems in America.
If they can't control you, then they'll destroy you.
And the problems ain't going to go away because there are a few of us who will talk about it. We can't change it. When you can't change something, leave it alone. Get away from it. That's the thing to do.
All right.
That's why I'm in France.
A tragic yet important theme also runs through Screamin Jay Hawkins' career, and that is his relationship with racism in the United States at that time.
When that first picture I made in 1957 was called Mr. Rock and Roll.
WINS, your contact station. The city is New York, and the beat? You guessed what the beat is. The big beat, the biggest of them all. Rock and roll, the greatest pop musical era of all time. And right this minute, we're going to hit you with one of the top vocal groups in the nation.
And I stepped out there dressed like an African warrior. And even the black people give me help. The funeral parlors give me help. The government and the state gave me help. So you're making fun of your own people. I said, no, there are black people who can sing the blues, so I'm one of them.
The greatest example being his cameo in Mr. Rock and Roll in 1957, which was actually cut from the film. As Jay says in an article for the LA Times in 1990 on March 29th, unfortunately, they cut out my best scene, Hawkins said. I was doing a new song called Frenzy, in which I was naked except for a loincloth and a spear and a shield and a bone in my nose. And the NAACP made them cut it out because they claimed I was making fun of black people. I felt like saying, where were you when they made King Kong, who was eating black people and crushing them, or Tarzan, with one tribe eating another?
Someone like Screamin Jay, and to a lesser degree Bo Diddley, coming out, acknowledging their blackness, not trying to get away with it. Chuck Berry, for instance, would slick his hair in an Elvis pomp. He would come off like a white man with dark skin. Little Richard would wear makeup. He was definitely black, but he made himself pretty. If you look at Screamin Jay or Bo Diddley, they are very black. If you listen to Screamin Jay, he had all this reference in his lyrics and his vocals to cannibalism and jungle this and jungle that, and it was kind of voodoo.
Through my mouth on the mystery train. Got there. I'm see you. We're gonna do a Michael Jackson over here. Whoa, 1, 2, 3.
Whether he was trying to pander to the audience or create shock in an audience and showing them what he thought that they wanted to see.
Screamin Jay.
Yes, Dennis.
Every night you're here, it's chaos, man.
Thank you, Dennis.
But as others have stated, it almost seems like Jay leaned into some of those racial stereotypes.
Oh, well, you see, you got to have something to make people interested. You got to be able to walk into a grocery store and say, give me a pound of baked barbecue gorilla ribs smothered in alligator soup with a dish of cow fingers and mosquito pie.
In his car, he always had, these snakes, all these strange things around. So I just look at the car and say, oh my God, what is that? Is it a witch doctor?
It was like Jay was trying to approach the opera from this horror voodoo theatricality standpoint in the guise of rock and roll.
What was that noise you were making during the break? Give me one of those with the pop and the...
The tribe I come from, it's part of the ritual.
Yeah.
We do that annually before sex. But since I got my bone, I can forget the sex.
Well, if you quit doing that, you get it more frequently than once a year.
Your situation.
Yes, yes. Huh?
God almighty. I love it. I'm just getting ready to talk about your...
That's quite all right. I'm with you, Marion. I'm with you. Let's continue.
I'm getting ready to talk about your act. Now, see, why did you create this
Henry
act?
wanted to say hello.
Hello, Henry. Are you trying to tell me something? He's
saying happy birthday, Marion.
I love it. Every time it, does it? And he's still smoking Lucky
This
Strike.
man has got more cancer. Look at his body.
I don't know what to say.
This is what cancer will do to you.
Is that a warning?
It's happening. He's finished. I asked him the other day, I says, why don't you quit smoking? And he says, why don't you mind your business? You do your act and I'll do mine.
But what's interesting is it is stuff like having a bone through the nose and coming out of a coffin and amping up the voodoo things that made people think that Jay was into cannibalism.
So Jay gave me a list of props that he would need for the road. We knew that we could rent a coffin in any town we went into, so that wasn't a problem. But Jay wanted us to make him fold up a collapsible African cooking pot and provide a mannequin for him in pieces and give him a bottle of ketchup and some dry ice and a machete. And Jay said, I'll take care of all the rest. So what Jay would do would be to open out his collapsible African cooking pot with the dry ice going and have this mannequin all covered with ketchup, and he'd be hacking this mannequin up as he sang Feast of the Mau Mau.
Cannibalism is not usually considered to be something positive, you know? I mean, not that I don't mind being eaten once in a while, but the average person is kind of scared of that, you know? Voodoo scares white people.
When he plays live, at least later on in life, you will notice when he plays live, he's got a bunch of mics set up. He didn't like to be tied down anywhere, and yet he's sort of tethered to a piano. So whenever he wants to turn his head and keep singing, he can kind of do that because he has mics all over the place, which I thought was really neat. And what's also nice about having the piano is it allows him to have his bag of goodies. He has all his tricks just sort of strewn about on the piano itself, the little crawling hand and yada, yada, yada.
We had started shooting and it wasn't raining, so we had to wait for it to rain, and Jay took out all these bones he had in a little leather bag, and he rolled them on this table and said, all right, go set your cameras up, get ready to shoot because it's going to stop raining. And we were like, come on, Jay, are you serious? He said, well, I'm half serious. Let's go see. And then like 5 minutes later, it stopped raining. It didn't rain again the whole time we shot there. So I'm never sure how much was that coincidence or was that really Jay? You know, I don't know. I would believe he had something to do with it. I'm not sure. But really like a very magical guy.
Oh, yes. Well, you see, I work with Diablo, the devil. And he tells me what to do, mystery, metaphysics, occult science, voodoo, black African magic, American magic.
Why? Are you afraid from something?
No, but I want to keep the bad spirits away from me because they've been after me since the days of Moses and Nero.
I've always had a problem with Screamin Jay's character and wondering whether he was voodoo or hoodoo.
Let's talk about hoodoo and voodoo. There are a lot of misconceptions. A lot of people believe that hoodoo and voodoo are the same thing. There's a lot of misleading information, especially on the internet, about the difference between the two. You have to understand that hoodoo came from a culture of survival. The people who were stolen from their country, stolen from their homes and brought over here, held tightly on to their spiritual practice. That was the only thing that they owned. And so it was very special to them. They had to keep it secret. Hoodoo is not something that was widely shared, and to this day, there's a lot of information that's kept hidden. Hoodoo relies a lot on our ancestors. It's a powerful practice because we remember those who've come before us, those who were the trailblazers, those who are the foundation on which we stand, the blood, sweat, and the tears that were sacrificed for our very existence. That's what hoodoo truly is, and that's where the power truly comes from. Your relationship with your living relatives and your relationship with your ancestors keeps your back straight and keeps you strong like they were strong to survive. That power comes through us and into the work. And when I say us, I do mean African Americans, because it is a result of the transatlantic slave trade. The word voodoo is spelled V-O-D-O-U. It's talking about a religion. It's talking about a whole religious practice which involves the Loa. There's Haitian voodoo, which is comes from Port-au-Prince. It comes from parts of Haiti, and it has a whole way of practicing it itself. But it is not hoodoo. Hoodoo does not use the Loa.
And some of the things that he presented to the audiences was voodoo, but I don't think he was ever anything else but the real thing.
Now, Jay, you're going to do something a little different tonight, right?
I'll do whatever you request. You want something different?
Stevie, you got any requests?
How about something traditional? Something traditional, yes, Steve? Some nice old songs.
Oh! Something real old!
Yeah.
But I think that the fact that he was raised by Indians, and the fact that he had a great long life and produced many children of it, I've heard. To me, that explains that the guy was definitely the real thing, that he was definitely had his feet in the voodoo, in the ground, the earth of voodoo.
Seeing you coming from that coffin gave me a chill.
See you coming gave me one too.
Let me ask you a question. Do you ever get letters about like the bone and you know, I mean,
Constantly.
Really?
Constantly.
But you love what you do?
Most of the world says you're crazy for doing it. And I say you are absolutely right. But the best part of it is I can go to the bank. And that's all I'm going to say.
Yes, because I'm definitely going to pay you.
Thank you. Thank you kindly, sir.
You had a song called The Constipation Blues.
Yes, sir. It was painful.
Do you still do those songs in your concerts?
All the time. I can't get off a stage unless I do it, and the people want it, they have to get it.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I got a pain down inside. Won't be denied. Every time I try, most people record songs about love, heartache, being broke, loneliness. Nobody. Ever recorded a song about real pain? The band and I caught a man in the right position. We named this next song Constipation Blues. Let it go, damn it, let it go. I don't think I can take much more. Let it go.
I said, yeah, A. But that was really strange because I'd never been this constipated, and my stomach was like I was pregnant. And they give me enemas, and they give me all kinds of laxatives instead, cod liver oil, castor oil, Metamucil. Nothing happened. And I'm sitting on the toilet. I must have been in the toilet at least 5 hours. And something says, it'll give if you just keep pushing, like I'm giving birth to a baby, except this baby's made out of shit. I'm sorry.
You think of the 50s as being so conservative and so straight, but yet that's when Screamin Jay was popular. You know, that's when I think it's just that people lost sight of what he was doing. You know, in a time of Alice Cooper, it was being big in the early 70s and things like that. There was every reason why someone like Screamin Jay should have been huge.
He was displaced, you know, a king displaced in this crappy little club uptown with a bunch of rednecks applauding for him whenever he lifted the skull or whatever. Nobody was interested in the music up there. This man should be at Carnegie Hall in a tuxedo, the way he sings, you know. Yeah. He sings to the gods. I mean, that's a singer.
My next guest has been. You want to read these cards here?
My next guest.
Our next guest.
Our next guest. Has been, you take that word.
Certified.
Freak since the 50s. He's not only one of the stars of the current film
Mystery
Train.
Acclaimed indie filmmaker Jim Jarmusch, known for his quirky, deadpan directing style in such movies as Down by Law, is a lifelong fan of Screamin Jay Hawkins. In the documentary film I Put a Spell on Me, Jarmusch spoke of his admiration of Hawkins.
Jay really got his start in acting with Jim Jarmusch, but I think it was a real tragedy, a real shame, a real missed opportunity that Jay was not cast as Audrey 2 in Little Shop of Horrors. If he had come out of obscurity just a few years earlier, Frank Oz would have brought the best out of Jay.
What a strong man to go through all the shit that he went through, Jarmusch said. To me, he was like a national treasure. He was like really something so valuable in our culture. Jarmusch also recalled being taken aback by the power of I Put a Spell on You.
The first time I ever heard it, I remember, was on a really small transistor radio, late at night in my room. And it really haunted me. It's still haunting to me.
Jarmusch would use the song as a reoccurring motif in his 1984 film Stranger Than Paradise.
Jim, oh, what a hell of a director and producer he turned out to be. He's a man of very few words. He's right to the point. He tells you what he has in mind. He says, you know, when I did Stranger in Paradise, he says, I put this Hungarian girl with this tape recorder to sing I Put a Spell on You all the time.
It had a waltz tempo, which is a kind of Central European musical form, and yet it's like a strange, snarling R&B kind of blues side to it.
Discovering that Hawkins had no rights to the song that was so integral to his film, Jarmusch decided to track the singer down and make sure he received fair compensation and more.
And then I realized Jay had no rights to the song, and so I had to pay a licensing fee to people that I knew that money never got to Jay. So that really bothered me. And then I thought, I got to find him. I got to find him himself and make sure he's okay with this song in the movie and that he gets paid. And I forget how I found him. I guess through maybe people at Squat Theater helped me. I can't quite remember, but we found him and he was living in a trailer in New Jersey and he had no phone.
The director would go on to cast Hawkins in his 1989 anthology film, Mystery Train.
Jiffy squid. Herbs and spices served with a tangy sauce with their own secret ingredients. Turn that damn thing off. You're listening to Dad T. Tyler, the man who...
When he was captured by the Japanese, right, he was tortured. And he had a big problem with Asian people for just his memory. And he had to act with these two young Japanese people.
Hi, good night.
Good night. How may I help you?
We would like most cheap room, please. Do you have?
All our rooms for two people are the same rates.
And he took me aside and said, you know, he said, I got a problem. I have too much bad memory. I'm trying to get over it. It's not rational. I don't dislike these two people, but I'm afraid of them, or they make me nervous. So it was good. He was very open about that. So I made sure that they understood. I talked to them separately about his life a little bit, and they were in awe of him. They really loved him.
Our rooms are $22 per night for two. Pay in advance.
I see.
And then then I made them spend time together. And once he spent a little time with them, it changed. You know, he got more relaxed around them. And even to the point that later he had a Japanese wife, or, you know, so I don't think that would have happened before Mystery Train.
Good night. Have a nice job.
Good night. Have a nice night.
Thank you.
And I wanted parts of Screamin Jay, but I also wanted him to be partly someone else. And I remember one time he got frustrated and said to me, you know, Jim, I don't understand. It's like you ordered a nuclear device, and now you're instructing it not to explode.
What got me upset with Jim Jarmusch was when we started the picture, for 3 days, I was on location, but I sat in the dressing room. Then they decided to start using me and filming. And we came to this one scene when this Japanese girl gave Spike Lee's brother, Sankey Lee, the plum. I had to eat that plum 30 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 25, 30. And at the end of number 30, he decided the best shot to use in that picture was the #1 plum.
Well, I don't think you should eat that thing.
Yeah, you're probably right.
You gonna eat it?
No, I couldn't eat that thing. Hey, my plum.
29 plums in my stomach that made me plum pregnant. And I said, man, I don't feel well. So he said, what are you gonna do? I said, I got some magic elixir stuff, I can take that. I got some strange medicine for my stomach, but I need to rest maybe 5 or 6 hours. He says, okay, go home, we'll bring you back tomorrow. And that's what he done. I said, but no more plums. He said, no, we got the plum picture. That's the only thing I dislike about Jim Jarmusch. Something else.
I think in his memory he ate like 50 plums, when in fact it was probably like about 8, you know, but still. But when you're acting for the first time and you know, you're forced to do these things over and over again, it's pretty hard. So, but he used to tease me about that, but not in any real, like, he wasn't really angry, but he kept that memory, you know.
I don't know, I guess in this business, you will meet strange people. In my case, I met Jim Jarmusch. He was strange, really strange, but I still like him, and I forgive him for the plums because I know he's doing his job, you know. But man, that hurt me.
A notorious ladies' man, Screamin Jay Hawkins' love life was nearly as wild and unhinged as his infamous stage show. Hawkins was married 6 times and indulged in countless romantic liaisons and extramarital affairs over the course of his career as a professional musician.
You know, I like the idea that a man, President Carter said it best. He was married to his wife, and he says, I looked at another woman, and I lusted in my heart. Do you realize what you can do with a strange woman just by thinking? You can meet her, say hello, take her to bed, make love to her, and you never did this, but you're thinking in your mind.
It is.
And this one girl said, what are you looking at? I said, just a minute. The sun shines on shit. So I know I can look at you. And besides, I just had you, and you ain't no damn good.
You look like somebody who married a very beautiful girl.
Oh, yes! 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 Yes!
After moving to Europe in the 1990s, Hawkins married his last wife, Monique, a French woman of African descent.
I married a black princess from Africa. The only problem was she didn't have no money.
We met in the Valois here.
The pair remained together until Hawkins' death in 2000.
Monique makes my 5th wife. First time I married a black girl from America. That didn't work. The second time I married a Filipino from the Philippines. That didn't work. The third time I married a black girl from Guadeloupe. The next time I married a Japanese girl from Tokyo. Oh, I had 6 marriages. The next time I married a French girl. And then the last marriage, which I'm into now, is Monique, African. I've forgotten about a couple of wives.
See, I'm a strange man. I don't believe my wife loves me unless she beats me. So she beats the devil out of me, and I love it.
And he said, take me for a ride in your car for a minute. So he got in my car, and he said, drive around the block. This is like 2 o'clock in the morning. And he has a little remote signal, what do you call that? A garage door opener, and he has it in his hand. And we're driving down the street, and he goes, okay, stop here. He goes, beep, beep, beep. And this garage door of this other house goes up and down and up and down, and he's laughing his ass off. I said, what is this? He goes, my ex-wife lives here. I want to bug her.
According to I Put a Spell on You, The Bizarre Life of Screamin Jay Hawkins, the performer never formally divorced his first wife, Anna Mae. Disappearing from the family for 2 years, he returned home a success driving a pink Cadillac. The celebratory mood would fade when Hawkins again left. On occasion, Hawkins' relationships would take a turn into dangerous territory.
Do you know the thrill of having a woman that will beat you up every night?
No.
Oh, that's beautiful.
An open relationship with singer shoutin' Pat Newborn nearly got Hawkins killed.
Very often, she brought home other women, and that Jay got to ball them both. That the three-ways were common with Shoutin' Pat and Screamin Jay and whoever their concubine of the night was.
Yeah. Why?
I had to leave Honolulu because I damn near got killed in Honolulu.
And then Jay said after a while that Pat insisted on exclusivity with some of the women that she was bringing home.
She throws you on the floor and stomps on your head and takes a big iron pole and rips you across your back. And I say, encore, please. Oh, I love it, I love it.
So one night, Jay told me that he went for one of the women that Pat was trying to deny him. And then he pulled up his shirt and he showed me some marks on his stomach.
Yeah, why?
A woman tried to cut my heart out of my body.
You see those marks? He says, when I went for her woman, Pat pulled out this little .32, and he says, and that made these holes right here, and right here. He said, when I fell down, she pulled out a knife and tried to cut me in half, and he showed me a line around his waist.
Where do you go out at night in Paris?
Nowhere. I stay home with my woman and my baby.
How old is your baby?
My baby is 3 years old.
3 years old.
Voila.
Hawkins also left behind an incredible living legacy of an estimated 57 to 75 children. The Blue Shouter's life on the road made him one of the most prolific fathers in music history. As reported by NPR, a Hawkins biographer created the website jayskids.com to track the singer's offspring. The biographer eventually located 33 of Screamin Jay Hawkins' children.
2 weeks ago, I saw this same girl. She said, Jay, I said, yes. She said, we have a baby. I said, oh. You're going to have to take care of me. I said, oh. You got to pay the gasoline, the electricity, the telephone. Give me some money for the clothes. What are you going to do? I said, baby, I want to tell you this much. I'm tired!
And how old are you?
Me?
Yeah.
Well, let's put it this way. Next July, 1999, I will be 70. That makes me 69.
Yeah, you look very young.
Merci beaucoup, merci pour tout, merci à vous.
For somebody who did the war.
Well, I mean, the war didn't hurt everybody. Lassie was in the war. Look at Lassie. He's still a nice shin.
Long revered and celebrated in Europe, Hawkins continued to perform at Paris's Maxwell Cafe 3 to 4 times a month until his death. In 2000, Hawkins appeared to be in good health. Still lean and robust, the 70-year-old had the appearance of a man 20 years younger.
How old do you think I am?
About 52.
What if I said more?
You're not older than that.
I'm older than you.
Are you? Older than me?
Yes. I'm 70.
Do you know, can you give me the secrets?
I'm asking you for secrets.
Because if you're older than me and you're looking younger, that means first you have a younger wife.
That's true.
That is true.
She's killing me, though. She's killing me every night. I said, Lord, don't take me.
Lord, of course.
In previous decades, Hawkins lamented being pigeonholed as the Black Vincent Price, having once told a writer, I wish I could be who I was before I was me.
We all have parts that we love about ourselves, and we all have parts that we hate about ourselves. And sometimes we hate those parts because those are the parts that people find the most popular, despite the fact it's not how we want to be.
Screamin Jay's story, just by who he was and what he did, is an incredible journey for anyone to have undertaken, and had a tremendous impact on the imagery of the art world in general, not only in music performance, but in the genre of horror films. The connection of life and death and how we perceive it, and how a guy like Screamin Jay helps us face the ultimate that we all have to face and laugh at it.
But as he entered his 7th decade, he made peace with being rock's original wild man. I find I can make people react more quickly if I walk on with a skull and snakes, Hawkins told The Independent's Philip Sweeney.
You know what I feel like? I feel like a caveman, an old Neanderthal man who started some weird shit many years ago and people wasn't ready for it.
People have lost that, no?
Yeah, but now, here it is 1999, almost 2000, and now people are beginning to say, this man is crazy. I've been doing it so long, I thought they knew about it.
I see smiles on their faces, and they're clapping and saying, here comes the crazy man, and I know it's going to be all right.
It was funny because Jay was so sensitive, you know, he could fuck with other people, but he got kind of hurt if you did it back, you know, sometimes. It was kind of contradictory. But that's because he was such really a sensitive man, you know, and a really a tough, wow, what a strong man to go through all the shit that he went through, in just racially and how he grew up, and then in the music business, and being so incredibly talented and not ever getting treated with the dignity he really deserved, you know. I mean, he did by certain people, but to me, he was like a national treasure, like really something so valuable in our culture.
I think the mold broke when Screamin Jay Hawkins came out of the coffin.
Opera was the dream of his life. He always wanted to do opera, but nobody, you know, was interested to sign a contract for him for opera. So when he went to Greece, and he called me, said, you know what? These people want me to sing opera, Monique. Do you realize that? I said, oh, that's great. And when he came back, he was, you know, so happy. I never seen him so happy about a project like that. He was like a little boy.
This is more than a dream come true. I'm going crazy with the idea that maybe it's still possible in my day and time that maybe one day I can be in the Greek opera house. My God, Lord, if it's true, let me find out. Can I stand in the doorway? Of course. I want to be able to walk the streets in tuxedos, the black velvet coat, the Homburg hat and stuff like that. I want to go into this like some country English gentleman or something, you know. I want to live the part, just like I lived the part of being Screamin Jay. Now I want to live the part of being an opera singer.
Figaro, 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 let me finger her roll. Let me touch it some more.
My next birthday, I will be 71. Shit, I'm too damn old to get a hard on, and I got a hard on. My wife think I'm Superman. I said, but what do you call me? She said, well, you ain't white, so I call you black man. I don't give a damn what you call me, so long as you call me sweet. Sweet black man.
And for those of you, because I cannot say no, I know the time went too far. We can't stick in stroking and all them other things because we're out of time. But I will say this, if God is willing and I stay alive and I have the strength, I'll come back and I'll do it again and again and again and again. Good night.
On February 12, 2000, Screamin Jay Hawkins suffered an aneurysm and died of multiple organ failure following emergency surgery.
And I hate that box. I have given orders to my wife, when I die, burn me, cremate me. And when that's over, take the ashes and burn them. I don't want nothing. I came into this world black, naked, and ugly.
Oh, that's great.
And no matter how much I accumulate here, it's a short journey. I will go out of this world black, naked. And I'll never, ain't no one's gonna feast on this body. No, no. If I had to go up steps to get to heaven. I'd never get to heaven. I don't like steps.
Screamin Jay Hawkins' influence as the grandfather of shock rock is undeniable. From the horrific stage shows of Alice Cooper to the squeals and groans of the Cramps' late frontman Lux Interior, Hawkins provided the blueprint for every band who incorporated macabre theatricality in their music. Yet it would be a mistake to overlook Hawkins' skills as a songwriter. Included in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's 500 songs that shaped rock, I Put a Spell on You is one of the most covered songs of all time. The song has become a classic.
Jay will never pass away. You know, his work will never fade away. Because there are always people that look for the good. The real shit is in the margins, you know, it's not in the mainstream. And that stuff stays alive, and that stuff will always be there.
To be or not to be? That is the question.
When Israel was in Egypt's land, let my people go. Oppressed so hard they could not stand, let my people go.